Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Dr. Thomas Hübl, who's here to share with us his new book, Attuned, Practicing Interdependence to Heal Our Trauma and Our World. By embracing our connectedness, are we able to evolve through the challenges of our time? Well, today, Thomas Hübl's here to share with us just that. So, Dr. Thomas Hubl is a renowned teacher, author, and international facilitator whose lifelong work integrates the insights of the great wisdom traditions with the discoveries of science. Since the early 2000s, he has led large-scale events and courses on the healing of collective trauma, with a special focus on the shared history of Israelis and Germans, and facilitated healing and dialogue around racism, oppression, colonialism, and genocide. He has served as an advisor and guest faculty for universities and organizations, and is currently a visiting scholar at Harvard Medical School Weiss Institute. So welcome to the show, Dr. Thomas Hübl.
Oh, thank you, Marianne. I'm happy to be here.
What an honor it is to have you here, and again, to have another great discussion. I'm so excited we get to talk about your new book. So, Attuned, what inspired you to write this?
Yeah, basically, I don't know, over 20 years, I was working with so many people in so many different cultural contexts on trauma, collective trauma, development. And one of the number one factors I saw all this time is relationship, relating, attuning, coming into a space together is the kind of the essence of the whole process. Either one-on-one, in groups, in very large groups, that's the essence of the process. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to write a book about how important is attunement in our parental relationships, in our work relationships, in our intimate relationships, in our trauma healing relationships and social healing spaces. So I think that's the motivation, the core motivation to write the book.
I know last time we touched on trauma as well. And there's a few things I want to unpack here. So when we look at Attuned, what does that mean for our listeners?
Yeah, it means that, we talk about relating and relationships as if the process was clear, but actually it's not that clear at all. It doesn't just mean because we are talking to each other. Even now, the two of us, when I talk to you, I also feel you, and by feeling you, you in a way come closer to me in my experience. And it's like when you it's funny, like when you have a radio station and you drive in your car and you want to find the right radio station that you want to listen to. So you attune, in a way, you tune your tuner to match the frequency of your wanted radio station. So that's attunement too. So to hear it without all the background noise and all the distortions, you hear the music clearly. It means you attune. And I think when we are together to feel each other, I feel you feeling me, or I feel you, is a basic building block of relating. It's like establishing an internet connection. So for us to be able to talk, we need a kind of a connection. Otherwise, there is no conversation. And I think that attunement is way more important, and especially in healing spaces, but in every relationship, basically, that I feel you and that my whole body is like a tuning fork. There's a physical attunement, there's an emotional attunement, there's a mental attunement, there's maybe a spiritual attunement, or there's an ancestral attunement. And the more levels we can include, the richer are our relationships. And also it's deepening the data connection between us. We all know how it feels when your internet connection is kind of so-so and it takes a long time to load stuff, or when you have an amazing internet connection and you download stuff in a second. And I think attunement is really working like that, that our nervous systems have this amazing capacity to feel each other and to be attuned to each other, so that the data flow between us is much richer, deeper, and it helps us to bridge many gaps that we have also in our society, where othering happens, where exclusion happens, where pain happens. So I think attunement is a core piece of relating.
Well, your subtitle is Practicing Interdependence to Heal Our Trauma and Our World. And I think for some people that might be something that they're not quite familiar with. And I'd love for you to expand on that.
Yeah, so interdependence is a very important principle, I believe, in life. It says, I am right now interdependent with the trees that provide the oxygen for me to speak. So I, as Thomas, don't exist alone by myself in the world. I think that's an outdated concept that is a result of maybe a hyper individualized society. That's where a lot of the focus is on the individual. I can make it. I can make my career. I. And interdependence shows us, of course, it's very important how I participate in life and how I co-create life, but it's a co-creative process. My conversation with you is an ecosystemic process. It needs the two of us, it needs the technology, it needs the electricity to run our devices, it needs the oxygen, it needs the circumstances, it needs the ancestors that led up to us. So interdependence actually means that the biosphere is a kind of an interdependent process. And the beauty is that we need to develop relationships with everything, basically, in order to exist in our highest potential. That even my purpose in life and my potential in life is not just a solo show, it's a co-creative process. And I like Bruce Springsteen said once in his show on Broadway, he said, to his audience, I thank you for providing me with purpose. Because Bruce Springsteen doesn't have a purpose alone. All his audience, all the people that listen to his music are part of his purpose. And so interdependence is a very important principle in living ecosystems. And the more I allow myself to feel that interdependence, that we actually are constantly in a relational flow with everything. And that's sometimes hard because many of us got hurt in relationships. So isolation, aloneness, retraction, trying to figure things out alone too long and too often is actually reducing the flow of what we can experience together and how we can support each other. But for many of us, relationships weren't always supportive and sometimes very painful. So to re-engage in the interdependence of a relational system is scary sometimes. But that's why we say healing ecosystems are so needed right now, because we need to deal with issues like climate change or other big social issues together as a collaborative effort, as a global collaborative effort. And that's why interdependence is, I think, a crucial factor to be able to do that.
So, with the experiences that we're having with climate change and social change, are those all related to one another? Is one an indicator of another one?
Yes, I think that anyway, in every living system, we see that the challenges that we have in life are also often the fertilizer of our growth. Often we don't want to see it that way because we just don't want to have that problem in our life. But when we are courageous enough to take our challenges on, to say, yes, that's a challenge. It's difficult to solve it. I don't even know how I should solve it, but I will engage with it. I relate to the challenges in my life. Then we bring in our creativity, which doesn't mean that I need to have it figured out but I'm engaging. And then I look, what do I need in order to step by step solve whatever I need to solve or whatever we need to solve in our life. And walking that path actually helps us to develop the capacities, not only to deal with the challenge, but actually to follow our own evolution or our collective evolution. So I definitely see climate change, for example, as the necessity, but also the triggering process to help us to develop collective capacities that we need to develop at that stage of humanity's evolution. And it's not easy, and it's a painful process because also many people suffer. We see already now the impact of climate change, but it's definitely the way how for us to develop collective competencies and global collaboration for more than climate change. But climate change is a big trigger at the moment. And so, yes, I think those challenges are the fertilizer for our growth. Also in our individual lives, I think we can try to turn away from the challenges or the problems, the difficulties, or we can say, okay, I turn towards and I look, what do I need and what kind of support do I need? What do I need to solve, whatever I need to solve? But I'm walking towards it. And that usually activates a lot of our internal intelligence, and it also attracts support into our life. And I think there is a beauty in engaging our life that way, and it takes a bit away the notion that we shouldn't have those challenges, or when problems are in our life that there is something wrong, versus, oh, there's a challenge in my life, so it invites me to grow, and I take that on because eventually the outcome is that I become wiser and more inclusive and more related to the world.
It seems that so many people for the last couple of years have been so detached, if not from the world, from themselves. So how can they start cultivating this sense of attunement?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And you actually said it yourself. When we feel less connected to ourselves, then attunement it starts with our inner world, that I begin to explore, oh, wow, my body is not just a kind of a functional thing that should work every day, but that I can explore the different parts of my body, my breath, my inner, the data that my nervous system experiences or channels the whole time about or from within my body. I can develop a capacity to become much more connected to the flow of my body, and that the body is not just a machine that should function, but is actually a living system that is super exciting to be explored. And then I see, wow, my body is actually not just the age that's written in my passport, but my body is the living record of all our ancestors that lived before us. So there's a lot of development and intelligence and complexity already in our bodies, in our emotions. Emotions are very complex social functions and relational functions. And exploring our emotions deeper helps us to feel more connected, to feel life deeper, to feel life richer, to feel the fragrances and the nuances of life much deeper. Imagine you're walking through a forest and either there are just trees around you, or you feel the richness of the air, the freshness, the fragrances, the different shades of light, the different plants, the different, you feel kind of embraced by the ecosystem that you are part of, because we are also nature. So it's the richness of life that also allows us to really deeply enjoy. And that kind of joy is a practice of presence. Feeling one's body makes us more present. Feeling each other is a practice of presence. Going through nature in that way are all functions that help us to be more present in that which is happening right now. And then it helps us to get to know ourselves, as you said, more deeply, feel more connected to ourselves. But that also means I'm more connected to the tuning fork that helps me to attune to you. Because when I connect to you, I can feel through my body, your body. I hear or I feel the emotional qualities when you speak. And there's a relationship between us, even if we can't see each other. And more so if we are in the same room, or if you're a family, or if you're working together in an organization. And that, so the body and our experience becomes also the tuning fork to be attuned to others. How parents are attuned to their children. It needs our own embodiment. And so from that, as you said, when we turn detachment into connection, then that becomes the transformation of the ecosystem. It's like as if you live in an ecosystem that has substances inside that are a bit toxic for life, or you start to clean that ecosystem so that we live in a water, in air, in an environment that is cleaner and sustains life better. And so we all the people that you know, all the people that I know, all the people that our listeners now know, these are all ecosystems. So every one of us creates a relational ecosystem around us. And I think investing into the health of that ecosystem is an amazing investment, not only in our own health, but in that kind of systemic health. And I think many people heard about this long-term study that has been, I think, 75 years or 80 years that Harvard did. What's the number one health factor? And it was clearly healthy relationships sustain health. So it's for all of us to be more attuned and to be more related means we are creating ecosystems that are more healthy for ourselves and for the people that we are related to in our life. So that's definitely a very good investment of our time, energy, and capacity.
Now, we've touched on attunement and trauma. So, how do the two relate?
Yeah, we could say, on the one hand, trauma is being created through unattuned relationships, through relationships that have been hurt already before. So when children get hurt by their parents, or when people get hurt through racism, or when people get hurt through violence in other forms, we are not related. We don't feel each other. When I feel you and I feel you feeling me works, we cannot hurt each other. We can only hurt each other when we become reactive, when we feel isolated, when we feel disconnected, detached from each other. Then we begin to objectify each other. We see the other person like a poster, not anymore as a three-dimensional felt experience. And that's the beginning of re-traumatization. And since trauma didn't start with us, we have been all born into a world that was already hurt, in some places more, in some less. But basically, we all carry systemic trauma and the after effects in ourselves. So whenever we become reactive, when we become triggered, it's much harder to stay related to the other person than when we have a good moment, an open moment, a listening moment, a regulated moment, however we want to call that, present moment. So when unattuned and disconnected relationships lead to trauma and to re-traumatization, then the reverse of it is that attuned relationships are the number one remedy to heal trauma. So how can we all work on creating more, like healing our own trauma through attunement, doing it together in social ecosystems, or doing it with when it's with an attuned therapist, or with a person, a professional that can help us to really go into more complex trauma. But all of it needs it at its core, it's attunement and deep relating. And so attunement and attuned resonant relationships are the basis of healing together. And so the more we turn disconnect and non-attunement into attunement and connection, we contribute to a more healthy world, or a more connected world. And if we do this on a large scale, so if many people do that in their family systems, in the way we parent our children, in the way we run our organizations, or we operate in workplaces, in the way we are citizens, in the way we relate to the biosphere, to nature, in the way we do politics, in the way we, engage in our daily interactions in the supermarket or wherever we are in our daily work life or living process, we actually can bring that all the time into the world. And if billions of people do that, our world will begin to look different naturally. So it's non-attunement is the basis for recurrent traumatization, and attunement and connectedness is the remedy for it. And we all can choose how we want to contribute to this world.
If someone has been working on their own personal trauma and decides they want to work on collective trauma, how do they start doing that?
Yeah, usually I think it happens naturally that many of us need some time to really work, as you said, on our individual trauma. But then it's like as if we unlock different rooms in our house. Imagine you live in a big house, but you live only in a few rooms and some rooms are closed and you never looked there because you maybe scared to go there. So you stay in the area that you know. And then you open one door, you open another door, you clean the rooms, you open the windows, you take all the dust and the stuff out that's in there. And it becomes actually a homey room. So trauma healing creates more the feeling of being more at home in the world, in ourselves, with each other, and to share a living space together. And as we go deeper with our own trauma healing, often people discover that then their ancestral intergenerational trauma starts to come up, so that it says, oh, my trauma healing is actually a domino effect backwards in time. And it includes the hurt relationships of my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and how they were living, what they experienced. So on the one hand, it goes back into this intergenerational tree. And then it also, when I become more open and I become more integrated, so I feel more related, I feel more creative, I feel also more courageous, I feel more agency in my life. And then the social issues that we have in our life also reach us deeper. So when we are more open, we are also more resonant with what's happening in our societies, and we also feel more agency or wish or motivation to engage in the more social healing aspect of the culture where we come from at first. So if you were born in the US, so racism, slavery, Native American genocide, civil war, immigration are very important collective traumatizations or wounds that need to be looked at by the collective. So the same is true I was born in Austria, so I needed to, and I still do, look deeply at the Holocaust. I ran many, many groups. I did many groups between Jewish global citizens, Israelis, Germans, in order to work on the legacy, because I deeply feel that it's very important to deal with the Middle Eastern conflict, to do this collective trauma work. And then I expanded into other areas in the global collective trauma field. And so for everyone, I think is to find, okay, what is the closest impact that I have of the collective wounding in our society, and that we create an architecture, kind of social healing spaces. Like imagine, we know that there are hospitals for people that really need urgent care for their health, but we also need urgent care for our collective issues or the collective wounds that we have. And we don't have them, or we have them only partly, but it's not something that the state supports, that we see, wow, we can reduce healthcare costs, we can reduce many social issues, we can reduce criminal rates, we can reduce racism, we can reduce many things, or create more equality, more inclusion in our societies by having social healing spaces. that would reduce a lot of costs that we have at the moment. But we don't have them. They are not part of our constitutions to say every society has to take care of its legacy out of big wounds, like Germany. Germany needs to take care of the Holocaust, the Second World War, in order to integrate that and turn that into wisdom, which Germany also, to a certain extent, really supported actively. And or in Rwanda, the Rwandan genocide, that there is a real work being done on a collective level through truth and reconciliation processes to work on that. And the next level is maybe some deeper collective trauma work. And these kinds of processes, we need to create them. They are not there yet. And I think many things weren't there and have been created by people in order to make it happen. And I think is a social invention that we need to create as I said, not just in a few spaces where it's already happening, but on a much larger space, so that we can harvest the fruits of the post-traumatic learning and the ethical development that comes with it all over the world.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment. We've been speaking with Dr. Thomas Hübl in regards to his new book, Attuned. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Jana Wilson, author of Wise Little One, Learning to Love and Listen to My Inner Child, a best-selling prescriptive memoir in inner child healing. I'm also the founder of the Emotional Healing System. The inner child, simply put, is your feelings, both positive and negative. If you'd like to learn to love and listen to your wise little one, pick up my book at Amazon or visit my website at janawilson.com. It's never too late to have a happy childhood.
The first thing you need to know about me is that I love my kids, but they are not my everything. They used to be, but that's when my entire life fell apart. In order to pick back up the pieces, I had to put the love I have for myself before everything else, including my kids. I'm Jessica Dennehy, and I own multiple businesses. I'm a best-selling author, and I have all the strategies that I've used to make my life what it is today. And I'm going to teach you how to do them in my new book, Selfish is a Superpower. So go get your copy today on Barnes & Noble or jessicadennehy.com.
Announcing a revolutionary tool for wellness. Scalar Light has the ability to enhance and harmonize your own bioenergies. With Scalar Light, you can get started in just minutes and begin feeling better the very next day. Scalar Light is a remote energy that gently and subtly works with your own body's bioenergies, increases pro-cellular wellness, and enhances your body's immunity.
Experience the benefits of Scalar Light. Try a complimentary 15-day experience at scalarlight.com.
Are you ready to celebrate World Wellness Weekend on September 15, 16, and 17? Well, we are. 6,000 venues in 147 countries are organizing fun and free activities for you to enjoy with your friends, your family, your colleagues. Look on wellmap.org, WELLMAP.
In your hands lie ancestral patterns. These patterns shape how you think, what you struggle with, and experiences you love, your life pattern. We're going into the latest neuroscience of biological hand analysis, a realm beyond palmistry where science and the soul entwine. Hand analysis is the latest method to transform lifelong patterns. I am Master Hand Analyst Brent Bruning. Join us and visit thepowerinyourhands.com.
Looking for a page-turner? Cozy up to a fantasy adventure romance trilogy with The Girl in the Toile Wallpaper by Mary Kay Savarese. The second novel in the Star Writers trilogy, The Star Writers Club, is coming soon. Take the journey. Connect with Mary at www.maryksavarese.com. Her books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie bookstores.
With Breath Hub, you'll experience the transformative power of breath as it harmonizes your body, mind, and spirit. Recommended by experts in fitness, sports, psychology, and medicine. Meet the scientific way of being well. Breath Hub. Breathe better, live better.
Pandemonium. Fast forward 20 years. A U.S. president seizes control of all U.S. missiles, the power grid, the banking system, and every computer in America as he hides in an underground bunker. Pandemonium, a captivating sci-fi thriller where a hidden war, psychics, aliens, artificial intelligence, and transcendental love collide with the latest media technology. Pandemonium, live to all devices. Get your copy on paperback or digital. Free sample at getpsychic.org.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with our special guest, Dr. Thomas Hübl, who's here sharing with us his new book, Attuned, Practicing Interdependence to Heal Our Trauma and Our World. Now, before we left for break, we were talking in regards just to how this all fits together. In your book, you talk about relational mysticism. What is that, and how does that relate to Attuned?
Yeah, often, when we talk about spirituality or mysticism, often mystics are connected to caves, maybe monasteries, to solitude, to kind of practices that need years, like decades, to flourish. And that's certainly true, especially for more monastic or for more kind of paths that happen in, Tibetan caves, which is a very powerful practice. But that's not what most of the people choose that are listening to us right now or that are reading my book. So we are living in society. We are living in a world where we are maybe parents. We contribute to society. We earn our money through the work that we do, and we are part of a kind of a collective process. And that's why certain practices that have been designed for monasteries or living somewhere in solitude or practicing that form of spirituality are not always compatible with a life in the marketplace, but they have been from the East, they have been imported in a way to the West often, and not always that's the best practice. So what I'm looking at is what is actually the deep engagement of a spiritual practice that is relational, that is based on relating, that is based on attunement. Because as we said before, when I'm more attuned to myself, I become more present. When in every interaction, in every board meeting or team meeting, or in every interaction with my child, I practice more attunement and presence, my daily life becomes my practice. So the more I engage and the more I attune, it actually helps me very much to deepen presence. And that's what most of the spiritual practices are designed to do. And then we can, of course, study deeper and study mystical principles like the wisdom of thousands of years of people that did it already before us and learn deeper. But for many of us, I think being more present in our life is great. And it includes that in the traumatic moment, we are overwhelmed. So shutting down that overwhelm or dramatic pain is the thing to do in the trauma response. So not being present is actually part of the trauma response. And to shut something down, to not feel something, to split something off, that's what needs to happen if somebody goes through a very painful experience. And that's why in the relational mysticism, we learn to work that the force of not being present is actually not a problem afterwards, but it's something we needed in the past and we need to learn to work with. Because otherwise, sometimes presencing practices become like a bit of an effort. Oh, I have to be more present. Instead of saying, oh, not being present, not feeling my body, not feeling certain emotions, or having a hard time to attune to other people seems like a dysfunction, like something I cannot do. But we could also say, oh, maybe as a child it was important for me to tune down or turn off part of my awareness of my body because it was painful often, or I was very scared and I didn't know I needed to shut down part of that fear in order to develop or go through my life. And so developing a non-pathologizing stance towards our inner process can help us to turn what seems like a dysfunction or a non-capacity into a capacity that we don't understand sometimes, but often served us in the past. And so this develops, and also collectively that we stop pathologizing ourselves, but become more curious and learn to work with the processes that are happening in ourselves. Because we could say, if there is, let's say, somebody leads a team or leads a company, and the person is constantly undecisive, doesn't know, and often takes long time to take decisions. And yeah, but maybe in the child time of that person, through a traumatic experience or through being hospitalized for 2-3 days alone without the parents, the person pulled out of the body in order to deal with the tremendous fear that created. And then later on in life, it seems like, oh, I'm scared to take decisions, or I'm indecisive, or I don't feel myself. That's why I don't feel my intuition so strongly, and or my gut feeling about things. And it takes me a long time. So it seems like that's a leadership issue. But we could also say, okay, let's listen to the symptoms it creates and go deeper with them and find out why that was needed and what was the intelligence at that time. And often when we connect to the intelligence of what seems like dysfunctional, it's super empowering and it helps us to heal much faster than when we look at it as dysfunctions that we want to get rid of.
It just seems that trauma is just so pervasive in our lives. And I know we've talked about, we go through body, mind, and spirit in regards to trauma, but one of the things that you've mentioned that I'd like to touch on is transgenerational trauma. How does that affect our DNA?
Yeah, I think what it affects more is what we call epigenetics. So there's our DNA, and then there is let's say an activation, like almost like a computer that activates the DNA. And that has, we call these methylations. There are different methylations, and they, in a way, are responsible for how the DNA is being opened, transcribed, and turned into proteins, or then different functions in the body. And so we know already from from studies and also mice experiments, for example, or animal experiences, that the epigenetics are changes in that environment around the DNA that are being passed on, for example, through sperm cells. So it means, and we can see this also often in people that went through strong traumatizations, like second-generation Holocaust survivors, that there are more stress receptors, fear receptors in the next generation. So in mice experiments, like a professor at the Zurich University, Isabel Manzui, could show that when a mouse has an attachment trauma, has been separated from the mother as a pup very early and then brought back, so that the offspring of that mouse has the same trauma symptoms without the trauma. They weren't traumatized in their lifetime, but they have the same symptoms. And this goes on 5-6 generations. If you do some kind of therapy with the mice of that offspring, you can reverse that and stop the transmission of that trauma symptom. And so it says in a way also that the changes are reversible. They are not cast into stone. They are epigenetic changes are kind of a memory, like a genetic memory that's being passed on to the next generation. But it's a more fluid memory, so it can be changed back in or changed into a more regulated version of it. And so that's what we are also working with. And when we do trauma work, we're also looking at changing those intergenerational mechanism into a more regulated mechanism. This also means that we, when we open ourselves in our own healing work, that when I say I feel you and I feel you feeling me, in our work we also explore, okay, what's actually not my intellectual understanding of my ancestors only, but what's my felt experience of my ancestors. And then it becomes a bit harder, because sometimes we know stuff intellectually about our ancestors, but we can't feel it because that part of our nervous system is kind of a bit blocked or stagnant at the beginning. But then when we practice it, and often we practice it in groups, so other people do it at the same time, it strengthens that experience, then we can learn to open that data flow. And then we see, oh, the ancestors are not just abstract data of people that lived before us. It's information that is alive in us. That's very different. It's not just something I talk about. It's something I can, in my ancestors, is information I can attune to. So I can begin to feel and be in resonance with. And so intergenerational trauma work needs that attunement to our ancestors in order to open parts of our own body. Then we can see, oh, that healing process opened something in my own body, in my own emotions, in my own creativity, maybe in certain aspects of my life. And I often thought, oh, that's my personal shortcoming, but actually it's an effect of an intergenerational trauma transmission. And that's very promising. So that's why in the book, I advocate a lot a system that I call IAC fluidity, individual, ancestral, and collective liquefaction of trauma, because trauma often creates frozenness and stagnation. And healing trauma makes life more fluid, restores movement. We feel more in a flow and in resonance with life when we heal trauma. So individual, ancestral, and collective trauma work is one understanding. These are not three different things, but these are three elements that affect each other all the time. So I think also that psychotherapy needs to be expanded into IAC integration work in order to serve us best. It's not one or the other. It's a system.
Definitely something that needs to be looked at, and I would agree with you. I think they need to incorporate that. Your book has just so much information that brings all of this together in such a nice way. One of the things I came across is when we talk about relationships. So how are relationships important for us when we're looking to go through a healing process?
Yeah, the relationship, on one level, we could say the relationship is the most important aspect. On the other hand, we often see that, especially when we got hurt, as we said earlier, when we got hurt through inappropriate relationships, and sometimes they are vicious, but they are not always vicious. They are sometimes just not functional, or we are not capable to provide those relational spaces when we are hurt and traumatized. So when we get hurt through inappropriate relationships through our parents, our teachers, other people in our life, trusting relationship is difficult because we are scared, we are protected, we are a bit defensive. It takes us some time to open up to relationships. So we always need to know that there are after effects of traumatic experiences in how much we trust and open up to relationships, which means for some of us, it also takes us a long time to trust, for example, like a skilled therapist, or to trust an environment, like a group where healing work happens, and engage. So we try often to do it on our own first. It's lovely to read self-help books, but there is a limit to how much we can do ourselves. And sometimes that takes a long time until we see, wow, I cannot just do it on my own. I need to open up to some support. And so knowing that also means, yeah, I know that it's challenging for me. And I also know that I need some relational support in order to really deal with my trauma and be able to go deeper. It's like when we have a computer and then we have another processor, another computer that supports the first computer. So like a therapist is in a way another additional processor that can help to co-process, or good friends in our life or good relationships in our life help us to co-process more difficult experiences. For complex trauma, we need specialists, but we also, even having a good relational ecosystem is an amazing resource in dealing with challenges in our life. And so relationships, attuned relationships, when one nervous system can tune in with another nervous system. And I also write in the book about that, for example, the fact that I was 1 year old, 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, and so on, means that my nervous system can tune in with clients that come to me when their trauma resides, when they were hurt at age 2. My nervous system can pick that up on the level where it happened at age 2. So there might be a 40-year-old person that comes to me, but actually the trauma is stored, the data is kind of stored in a specific file. So it needs me to be attuned to the 2-year experience plus to the 40-year experience that the person brings, that comes to my office or to my group. And that attunement is in a way a very specific attention that helps us to create a safer space. And we know Steve Porges, the polyvagal theory, also discovered that that there is a part of the vagal parasympathetic nervous system, the nervous system that's here for relaxation, digestion, integration, that runs through our heart, the kind of a front part to that part of our nervous system. And that's when we say our heart is open, we feel more regulated, we can listen to each other, we can create the space that allows depth and mutual reflection. That's the nervous system that's doing it. So when we feel somebody that is distressed, we can, what we call, co-regulate with them. We can feel that person, we can feel their stress, and it helps that other person to calm down, gain again more perspective, be less reactive, be more able to look at their life or the situation they go through. So co-regulating with each other is actually a very important social skill. That's important in organizations. When there's a big issue in an organization, everybody gets stressed out. If you have somebody there that can co-regulate with the people that are stressed out, then the whole team can calm down. When we're more regulated, we can think about problems much better and we can find solutions. And that's also important with our children. When, let's say, my daughter comes and says, Daddy, I'm scared. Then I can say maybe, oh, don't be scared. There's nothing dangerous in the house. So what did I do? I devalued the emotion of my daughter. I said, don't be scared. my daughter needs me emotionally, but I gave her an intellectual answer. So there is no danger in the house. Versus I turn to my daughter and say, yes, I feel you're scared. Come to me. I embrace her, I create some body contact, or she comes to me, and then I feel her. So my nervous system helps her nervous system to co-regulate and calm down. And then I say, okay, let's have a look what really happened. And then I bring rational leadership or parental guidance into the situation. So it doesn't mean that we don't reflect on the situation, but we do it after we met the emotional need. So we created emotional resonance, creates a mutual, I feel that you're scared means I value your emotional experience. That creates togetherness. And then we can look at the issue that happened in the house that was scary to start with. That's a different, it sounds at first like it's a small difference, but it's not a small difference. It creates a much more regulated state and a much more kind of respectful appreciation for the emotion. And so that's also a basis for leadership, and it's a basis for any kind of healing relationship also.
Well, it seems it's a life skill that many people today do not possess, because that emotional aspect of connecting with people and being able to really respond to people in an emotional way has been almost removed from our society.
Exactly. So that's why we have to reinstall that and see, wow, the amazing, because that's changing our world. Because sometimes we look at changing our world in big things. So how can I deal with big things? But often we change our world through step-by-step processes and step-by-step solutions. And I think developing that kind of resonance, attunement capacity, that relational skill set, the co-regulation capacity is something that's inherent to being a human being. And so even if it seems like it's sometimes absent or some of those capacities have been hurt through trauma, that's true. But I think the good news are that we all carry that inside, and we carry that inside for thousands or tens of thousands of years. So even if it got hurt in our life partly, we can re-evoke those capacities because our nervous systems and our bodies have that deeply ingrained inside. So, and I have seen many groups, I have seen tens of thousands of people in relational spaces reclaiming those capacities and creating tremendously healing spaces. I have seen people, like hundreds or thousands people in a room, and one person spoke and it was so connected, so silent, so present, so felt together what that person said. And then it creates a collective healing space. Then one person's issue turns out to be 300 other people's issue in the room too. So we see, what we often try to hide from each other is actually something that many people in the room anyway share. I often say, when somebody shares something in a large group, and then I say, okay, how many people know the same or a similar issue? Then, I don't know, 100 people raise their hand. And I said, you see, we are all sitting in similar experiences. And when we begin to share them and they become conscious processes and we relate to these processes, that's the beginning of a healing field. And so I have often seen people that never practiced attunement before. And when we are in an ecosystem of attunement, those capacities get reactivated, of course, step by step, but they do. And then it's amazing what we can see, what can happen in social spaces in terms of healing.
Well, Thomas, you're such an inspiration. It would be easy to talk with you for hours on this, but I know today we cannot do that. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Yeah, as you said, reading Attuned is for sure, my new book is for sure a great way to connect to many things that we talked about now, to read it more in depth, to get some practices and also some meditations and ways and practices for our daily life, how to develop attunement. Then there is, of course, my first book, also Healing Collective Trauma, for anybody who is interested in the collective trauma work. Our website is Thomas Hübl, Hubl, thomas.hubl.com is my website. There's a lot of information. And the pocketproject.org is our NGO. We do global collective restoration work, and we have many projects that we are in the nonprofit sector we are engaging in. And so anybody who is interested in that, then the collectivetraumasummit.com is our annual summit with amazing speakers. It will come up now in the fall. It's the next summit. So lots of possibilities to engage and many more.
Well, Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Thomas Hübl. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Attuned, Practicing Interdependence to Heal Our Trauma and Our World. Attuned's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. You can also purchase this book directly from the publisher, Sounds True, at soundstrue.com. Make sure also to visit Dr. Thomas Hübl's website at thomashubl.net. That's Thomas, Hubl.net. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.